let's move in and talk about functions and roles. Section 2, page 6. What are some of the jobs, what's some of the work that has to get done at IEP meetings? Minutes, what else? Well, any of the paperwork, but God bless paperwork.
Making decisions.
Making decisions. Sharing information and reports, absolutely. All of those kinds of things have to get done at an IEP meeting. You need to have the people there to do the work that we have outlined. So, who needs to be there? If you have people at an IEP meeting that don't have a job or don't have work to do, they don't need to be there.
Unless they're required.
Yes, but we're going to make sure that the people that are required to be there have a job to do. And if you're required, you have a job to do. If you are, for example, the gen ed teacher, you are there to present information about the child's work and position as it relates to the state or Common Core standards. And I think a lot of our gen ed teachers don't understand that. They do not understand why they are there. And so, of course, they don't want to be there, which means they're sane, because if you like to go to meetings where you don't understand why you're there, you have a problem. But they come and they don't know why they're there, so they don't want to be there. So I think we in special ed have not done the greatest job in the world of explaining to people and explaining to our gen ed colleagues in particular why they need to be at an IEP meeting. That's what's really critical. So I suggest that we have little structured scripts of roles so that you can describe those for people and let them know why they're there. I'm the psychologist. I'm here to explain the assessment that I did on the child and to participate in the decision making. I'm the parent. I'm here to participate in the decision making and I'm here to advocate for my child. That's appropriate. I'm the special ed director. I'm here to allocate resources for the district. And I'm here to participate in the decision making. If we understand when we go to meetings what our role is, it's going to be clearer to us how to participate. Now, as part of that role definition that I'm talking about, we can get into this concept of a neutral facilitator. Somebody that comes in from the outside and helps to and assists with the facilitation of the meeting. Now you saw that when Doug facilitated, he facilitated the meeting as the assistant principal. He had a stake and a share in the meeting. He was also there as the LEA rep. But he used facilitation skills in order to run the meeting, and you can do that. So let me do a little diagram for you here. I'm going to move Doug's dates. So this is kind of a continuum along which meetings happen. And over on this side is chaos. Nobody's in charge, it's anarchy, everything is out of control. So over at this end, you have a neutral facilitator. Somebody comes in who doesn't have a stake or a share in the meeting, doesn't have any responsibility about the meeting content, and they're going to run the meeting. And then along here you have where participants are, and maybe over here you have a chair of the meeting, and maybe they have some skills for running meetings and maybe they don't. And then over here you have a facilitated chair. This is somebody like the way Doug played it, that runs the meeting based on the fact that they have some of the art skills of facilitation. There's no wrong answer, but I think you're going to want to try to run your meetings more down at this end to try to get them to run more smoothly. When you look at how to define your role, if you turn to the next page, You can see that we've given you a sample for how to define your role as a neutral facilitator there in the middle of the page. So take a couple of seconds and read that over. So that gives you an example of how you can define your role as a neutral facilitator. You need to be thinking about how the rest of your team is going to define their roles, how you want to do that, and also then how, if you are a facilitated chair, how you're going to define your role. All of those kinds of things when it comes to defining your roles are really clear. And it will, I know that this sounds like such a small thing, but when you define roles, it really can make all the difference in the world in a meeting. You know, we run around the table at a typical IEP meeting, and I introduce myself as Dr. Little, and you introduce yourself with all the degrees and all the initials after your name, and we run around the table and do that, and we come to the parent, and the parent hangs her head, and she says, I'm just a parent. And we've already set up a second-class citizen in the room. And part of what you can use roles for is to level the playing field and ensure that everybody knows why they're there and what their roles and responsibilities are. I was speaking in front of a group, Doug and I both were in Williamson County. We did a presentation at Franklin High School. Now Franklin High School is known as the place where Ashley Judd went to high school. It is a blue ribbon school, not necessarily because she went there, and really a beautiful facility and a first-class learning institution. Speaking in front of a faculty of about 150, and I said to these gen ed teachers, I said, why do you go to special ed meetings? Why do you go to the IEP meetings? And there was silence in the room, and people wouldn't make eye contact with me, you know, they're like this. And finally, one nice young man raised his hand, and he says, ma'am, I was in the South, ma'am, I don't have a clue. And the rest of the room started to nod their head. So this is something that we need to be clearer with our gen ed colleagues about and why they are there. I think if they knew how important their role is and what work they had to do at a meeting, they would be far more likely to be engaged in IEP meetings.